welcome to Comedy from the Middle of Nowhere. I'm Scott Ecker, the hairiest host in late night, I would hope. This is a very special episode. I'm interviewing local actress and theater practitioner, all-around facilitator, Carrie Winterstein. Have a good talk with her, so hope you enjoy Carrie Winterstein. So we're shooting here at Theater B for the show. And you're one of the founders, right?
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that?
It's funny, I met with someone this morning who basically asked the same question, and it's like, well...
You get that question a lot?
Yeah, there are short versions of the story, long versions of the story. Sometimes it includes funny parts about the kids, sometimes we just skip right past that and go to the weird story about David Shear and Pia Shear finding us and finding us this space. But really it stemmed at its most basic from a desire to actually stay in Fargo-Moorhead, but a desire to make that work.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be happy here if I didn't have involvement in theater, number one, and doing something meaningful, number two. For me, I've never been the kind of person who's happy punching a clock 8 to 5. Just isn't my style. And, you get to a point in life where you sort of have to accept that not only do you love a particular thing, but it's where your gifts are. So you just kind of have to accept it when you're an actor.
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand this.
Yes.
And are navigating that right now.
That's kind of
how do I make this work?
It's kind of why I'm doing a show like this. It's like, I've got a really weird skill set.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to, put the 10 years into just being a stand-up, because I don't like just doing stand-up. I don't want to move somewhere and struggle there and not like it when I like it here, so I want to try and explore. Yeah. And Theater B's been a place where you've let me explore a lot, as an actor, but also you've let me put on comedy showcases here.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
It's so great to have the space used for more kinds of art and entertainment than what we have the capacity to produce.
Yeah.
It's a great little space, and we created it quite intentionally that way. And we know that the work we do is only one kind of work that presents really well in this intimate environment. Yeah,
and just as a performer, it's the intimacy is so great.
It's really nice.
Because you feel that, but also as an audience, because I see as many shows here as I can too, so you feel more of a part of it.
I do, I feel spoiled by getting to perform in this space so much.
So let's talk about you as a performer, because I've gotten to see you in several things. You've been in Midsummer Night's Dream, I saw Vino Veritas, recently Scrooge Macbeth, but Becky's New Car is the one I go back to as I just loved you in that.
Oh, thank you.
Which, it's a comedy that's a one-woman ensemble show, kind of, because you had a good cast, but you were on stage a lot.
Yeah. We did. We talked about a sense of, it's a one-woman show kind of with a chorus. And that part was pretty intense, the way that the story really moves and is so dependent on the one actress guiding the whole thing, having a sense about where the trajectory of the story is going, and also a sense of being surprised by the fact that the story doesn't go where she originally intends it to go, even as she's sort of telling it live to the audience and inviting them into the process. So it sort of had everything in terms of some important themes to explore, also some great comedy, live interaction, some great improvisational stuff where the playwright simply gives you some suggestions and says, you're going to ask the audience this, and if they respond this way, I suggest you try, or whatever might work in the place you are. And so it really did have that sense of being a completely different experience every single performance, because it completely depended on what the audience
And that show moved at such an incredible pace, too, because you do costume changes while you're doing your dialogue, and it was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, Becky leaves the stage really only once. the show.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it was kind of a marriage.
You talk about the responsibility of that role. Do you think that your skills as like a theater manager and running those types of organizational things kind of helped you as an actress in that one? Or?
Maybe they did. I don't know that I would have felt comfortable trying something like Becky earlier on in my life. You know, although there's something really fun about theater being the place where you get to explore all kinds of experience that you would not have in your daily life, and many that you wouldn't want to have in your daily life. And you get to just imagine and put yourself there and go ahead and play and see what it might be like and explore that. And so in Becky's case, I think it helps that, I was age appropriate, I needed a marriage, I get what some of those stresses are like when you're in a job that you don't feel fulfilled in, and you're sort of looking for something to fill a void. I get all of that intellectually, and I'm grateful that that's not a place where I am living right now in my life.
Yes.
My life is pretty great, actually. But I can understand where Becky was and what she was looking for in a way that I don't know I would have fully appreciated at 25 or even 30. And so I think that it just makes it easier. Then you can focus on other things.
Yeah.
You're not having to do the research and figure out what this character's mindset is. And in terms of being a manager, I don't know. I think in some ways, I read the words on the page and they have a rhythm to me. And I think Stephen Dietz is an effective enough playwright that the rhythm of that show is built in. It is high-paced. It does move. Because there has to be a sense of panic that builds for her in order for the payoff to work. So I think it's all there in the script more than in anything that I would bring to it.
Another great script I got to see you work with is God of Carnage last year.
Yeah, another example of it's all right there in the script,
Yeah.
and you know she does not let you leave the stage, and that's purposeful.
Yeah.
You don't go away because that's how you build tension. It's these people who are stuck in this room together, and they are all trying to escape that room and that conversation, but their desire for being right and making a point keeps them at odds and keeps them in the room. Yeah, that's a fascinating script.
It is. I mean, because there's an escalation that, like, I mean, the show has an escalation, but you each have different, and it is great to watch, especially. And one of the things I love about this space and performing here, but also watching here, is it's such small casts. I mean, what's the biggest show most you've ever had on stage?
Probably one of the shows you were in.
Okay.
Second Stage was our biggest cast shows. I would have to say perhaps Shipwrecked might have been the biggest one when Matthew directed. I think we had 16 students in the space at that point, and that was a lot to manage, and certainly for the few times that all of them were on stage, we were really grateful that Gabe, our scenic designer, understands our space so well. He could create levels and other spaces. I mean, he even built a platform up above over the walkway, giving us another, 4 or 5 feet of space in width that we don't have otherwise because wheelchair restrictions. I mean, we can't build over there. And so Gabe often does that, kind of plays with the true parameters of this space to create enough playing area for actors. And 16 people.
A lot of your shows do make very economical use of the space, but you're very creative in how you recently Clybourne Park. I loved how the scene change during intermission. I mean, represented what was going on, but it also used the space well, how you'll build a water, like a pool in here.
Right.
You'll change this into two seating on both sides. And
I think there's, I really value the fact that there are parameters that require us to get creative. Now, I'm not always happy with the parameter of not enough money. That's the parameter that also makes you be creative. which is fine, except that that's the one that I'm always battling. But I don't mind that the space itself is somewhat restrictive. And I think there's a lot of creativity, obviously, that people employ in bigger spaces with more tech. But then you also need a bigger budget to go along with it. You know, there's a reason that huge musicals are exciting. Yeah, you can make stuff where people fly in and out. That's amazing and really creative. And when you're in a small, pared-down space where what you value more is a really direct relationship with your audience, then it means you have to be more suggestive about what you're going to do in terms of set. Otherwise you need a lot of money. We've always felt that putting money into how the people interact is more important than putting money into flashy scenery. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to have. People like it. You know, we're in this amazing technical era. There's so little we can't do. You know, certainly if we were in a film medium, we all believably fly through space. We just don't even think anything of that. So we kind of like that there are certain scripts and certain settings and certain stories that the very restrictions of them require us to be creative in that world. And that's kind of fun.
And even if it's not the most technically like a spectacle, I remember the red set or the set for any of these shows. They do stay with you. And like the way that the actors kind of make up for that, like going back to Midsummer's, the way Colin as Puck moved throughout the audience into space, and in the aisle he went riding on Scott's back when he was bottom. You know, you remember things like that because it's, again, the personal connection with the small space.
Yeah, you're not going to miss something because it's right there in front of you. You can't miss it because you're up in the nosebleed seats. You know. Becky's was another example of the restrictions of the space working really well and being very intentional as the kind of venue that the playwright wrote that play to be performed in. He's completely unapologetic about the fact that he wants you to make it theatrical. Just the fact that it's direct address to the audience. While action is going on. So he's already breaking down that barrier and saying, hey, we know we're doing a play. Now you're going to watch us. Oh, and when we ask, will you participate? Yes. Okay, great. Let's go. And so in that situation, here's a playwright who who writes that she is in her living room, in her office, in a car, in a beautiful, gorgeous seaside house. But he's not making any bones about the fact that he doesn't want each of those places to be realistic and to take time for there to be scene transitions. He's writing a play that says, no, and by the way, we've already told the audience, we're in a theater. So don't try to make these things completely real. That's another struggle that I often have.
I like finding that in the script when we did State Fair in Brookings last summer, and the writer's notes say, do not use a real pig in this, that will ruin well, which is great to know that we don't have to find a real pig for props or whoever does that.
No, and I have trouble with current playwrights who often think they're really writing for film when they do say all these different locations, and they don't give you that note, and they don't give you that out. They expect that you're working with a huge budget, and you're actually going to be in a car, and then 2 seconds later in your apartment, and 2 seconds later in the doctor's office, and it's like, okay, really? How do I move my car off the stage and my apartment in, and then I'm in a medical setting, and then I'm in a park, I'm outdoors, and then I'm indoors again, and so that kind of thing kind of drives us crazy, that need for realism when playwrights aren't actually thinking about how plays really get produced in space.
But you do find good scripts that work in this space. I mean, a lot goes into that. I mean,
and that's part of why I say I kind of like the restrictions of the space. It already sets up a pretty good screen for us in terms of criteria. Can we produce it? Well, is this a play that would suffer if we can't make it as realistic as possible? Or is it a play that might actually be enhanced by the audience filling in some gaps with their imagination? That right there is a great criteria for choosing a play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what are you most proud of at Theater B here? What, if you can, I know that's like, for you, like, picking favorites between your children.
Oh,
which I won't ask you to do that, because that would be, if they're watching, so.
I'm proud of all of my children, Theater B included. No, I think in some ways, I don't know about pointing to artistic projects because there are, some of them are so distinct from one another and they have qualities about them that really do make me just glow with pride. But I think overall, I'm just proud that we're still here.
Yeah.
That this idea that we had 13 years ago, was really fitting, that we did identify a need in this community. And because we did that, and we continue to check in on that question, audiences keep saying yes, and supporters keep saying yes.
Yeah.
And partners keep saying yes, collaborators keep saying yes. And to me, that's a huge point of pride. I'm so glad that we're still here and still doing as good a work as we can. We would always like it to be better. We would always like to get to the point where artists don't have to have day jobs. They just get to be creative and make art and help educate and tell stories all day long. That's what we aspire to.
But you're not stopping with, well, we can't, so we won't think about things like that. You are always growing and pushing things.
Yeah.
That's, I think, why you're still around.
Yeah.
Because you haven't, we found one thing that worked, kind of.
Stick with that?
You're not saying it. Yeah.
No, we do. It's one of those things that even some of our outside consultants and trainers and stuff have remarked about Theater B, that as an organization we're always iterating. We're always asking ourselves, how did that work? What worked about it? What didn't? What can we learn from this? Okay, so if this is what we learned, how do we implement that and change how we're doing things? And it's everything from how do we change how we sell tickets, how do we change how we cast a show, how do we change how we compensate artists, how do we change how we schedule board meetings. I mean, anything that sort of needs to be addressed. If it's not working, let's figure it out and make a change. And part of that, I admit, is a facility that comes from being small.
Yeah.
That we can be agile. But being adaptable in today's climate is a huge benefit. I don't know really quite how we do it other than we have a mindset to do it.
I think that's
and it's built in as a value. So we're okay with the fact that things are changing all the time. I know some people it's uncomfortable for them. I know that there are times for me when it's uncomfortable. I really wish we had a policy and a procedure for this.
Yes.
Because then I would know what to do when this question comes up. In other ways, I really love that we are able to be flexible and just kind of take what comes, do our best, hold values out and remind ourselves that that's the guide, so we don't, hopefully destroy people and relationships along the way.
Yes. And we have. I haven't heard of any destroyed relationships.
Well, that's good.
Yes, that's
good.
Yeah. I haven't heard of anything like that. But hearing all of this is amazing to me, because I've been part of creative environments where it's, well, this is the way we've always done it, or no is what they always go to.
Sure.
Things I've been passionate about haven't been able to get off the ground because it's not an open mind. You have very flexible, very quickly you're able to rattle off a lot of things that you do and what you think, and I think it's so amazing that that's part of the structure of this place.
That's really intentional, and it's hard work. I mean, it is. It would be really easy to just fall into doing it this way.
Yeah.
And I think there are some things in which we have done that. It's great. Brad and I have a really great sort of...
And Brad Delser.
Brad Delser, yeah. He's my colleague. He's in the ensemble, and he's also the other staff member. Yeah. And we have a great kind of creative tension around the question of the always doing it a certain way. He's always pushing at me saying, I'm not sure we should do main stage, 4 shows in these slots. I think we should mix it, and luckily we have a larger ensemble and a group who agree to come together pretty regularly in the artistic direction committee to really grapple with those larger questions of, is it getting stale?
Yeah.
Is even something as simple as our calendar getting stale?
Yeah.
And of course, from where I sit as the person who has to sort of speak that message to the public, I would like it to be fairly regular, because then I know what I'm saying and people know when to come. Basic things like that. On the other hand, I would hate for us to get into a cycle where simply because we've set a schedule, the artistic work gets stale. I don't want that to happen either. So I appreciate that we're in a kind of good creative tension, even around basic questions
It's
of
great that you allow that.
how many shows we do, or where we do them, or how many collaborations we can do, or should we just do staged readings and not try to produce so much, or, who knows? It's all open. It's all open.
So, we'll probably get back to Theater B, but I do want to make sure we have time to talk about you as an actress again, because I saw you in Doubt.
Oh,
and that was an amazing production. Doubt at Straw Hat this summer. Another great script you got to work with.
Oh, man. Cream of the crop. It was really incredible. It's such a delight to do scripts like that.
Yeah.
There's a reason that Shanley won a Tony and the Pulitzer. The script was so incredible in terms of its efficiency, sort of an economy of the language, telling you exactly who these people are and what's at stake for them. There again, much like God of Carnage, much like Becky's New Car, no break. No break in the action, so everything escalates really quickly. And the stakes are very high, and just, it's so fun to play. So fun to play that.
Well, and thinking of what it must be like as an actor in that show, is that it's about uncertainty.
Right.
So how do you play that with tactics? Because you're going for a very specific thing, and then the other actors, and I grew up going to church with Nick Wheeler who played Father Flynn, and it was amazing, but that's a tough role, and it's...
Well, and it's interesting. Every person you talk to will have a different take on whether or not Shanley leaves the question open at the end, or whether Father Flynn is very clearly guilty, or whether Sister Aloysius is very clearly a mean-spirited person and Father Flynn is just the victim. And everybody has a different take, and it's a brilliant spectrum, really. It's not like you fall on one end or the other. You fall somewhere in this gray area over here, and somewhere in this gray area over there.
The movie came out when I was a senior in high school, and I discussed it with my drama teacher, and she thought something different than I did, and we had kind of an argument about it. But now after seeing your production, I think my opinion might have changed, and it's amazing that,
Well, and I think a lot of that, honestly, a lot of that is the script, but a lot of that is also Patrick, the director. I think a director can really steer an audience one way or the other with that piece, particularly. Because, the words are right there on the page, but in terms of Sister Aloysius, for example, my character, she is hard. That's there on the page. You can't get around, things like ballpoint pens make them press down, and when they press down, they write like monkeys. There's no, or a line like, you lie. Well, there's no soft way to say that. That is not, it is absolutely a confrontational line, so there it is. But there are these other moments in the script where you start to see a little bit of the human side of her. And very little background information about prior experiences she has that are informing this particular moment and saying, it doesn't matter what's at stake, you have to, the risk of him being a pedophile is too great. So even if you're wrong, removing him is worth it, because if you're right, he can't be allowed to stay, and there's simply no way around the fact that the risk of him actually being a pedophile is too great. It's not okay. It will not be okay under any circumstances. So you got to do what you got to do. And it's really interesting to me how a director can allow the actress to be somewhat sympathetic and soft in those moments, so that when she is hard, you feel like she's just. Or a director can say, pull back on that softness there. She's still hard. So that when she's really hard, that's all you get, is she is hard, unforgiving, unrelenting, and totally on a warpath, and he is an innocent victim just being left on the side. So I think a director has a lot of play.
Yeah, it was a very well-directed show. Another thing that I noticed watching it that I thought was a challenge you overcame was, first off, the costumes. Your face is...
Yep.
And so for you to be able to emote that much and, us to get a clear...
Yeah, this and your hands are really all you have.
And I think
it's your presence in space.
But also your voice. I noticed that, and you mentioned the hardness that had to be there. It was a very, you didn't get to vary a whole lot, but you found the rhythm with that script. So it was always fascinating, always intense. Even when I couldn't see your face, I knew what your character was doing.
Good.
So I thought that was an incredible job you did.
Thank you. It was so much fun to do. I grew up in Catholic school, so I totally got Sister Aloysius. There again, it was one of those situations where I didn't have to do a lot of research just to figure out the world of the play. That part I felt like I lived in very naturally. Lots of memories coming back as I rehearsed her. And also just enjoying that the play is simply throwing out there the question of, here's this situation where so many of the protocols in this institution prevent openness and prevent people from having candid conversation about their concerns in a way that they know change can happen. And I thought, he sets it in 64 to kind of heighten the sense between Sister Aloysius being from an older part of the church, a church where just last year they were all speaking in Latin, to this new, young, upstart American style of Catholicism as it's kind of figuring itself out in the wake of Vatican II. Shanley sets it there to heighten all of that, but the issues are still clearly present in the Catholic Church, and there are no easy answers.
No, and that's the great thing that the script openly acknowledges with why sermons are stories, not real, because leaving with that uncertainty that the play does creates...
And if you see the script itself, it is doubt, a parable. It's just telling a story and letting you decide. It's interesting, Patrick did want to leave the play a little more open to interpretation, but my husband, David, obviously, who you know well, and is also a theater director, he was rehearsing my lines with me quite a lot in the rehearsal process, and he felt really clearly, he's like, Flynn's guilty. I think the script says Flynn's guilty. I was like, really? You think so? I don't think it's that clear. I think it's pretty
and knowing David, he's not going to look at something and not have his opinion on it.
Exactly, and I said, I think it's simply because you're rehearsing my lines and you're not hearing his monologues as much. And I think that's another wonderful piece of the structure that Shanley plays with. He gives Flynn these monologues that allow him to make a connection with the audience on a personal level. And Sister Aloysius never has that. She doesn't have a monologue that's self-reflexive, that's pondering important questions and asking for her congregation or her students to give feedback. And, whereas there he is playing basketball with these 12-year-old boys, and the audience gets to observe him as a human being, and they never observe her that way. She is the disciplinarian at the helm of this ship, and she's got to get it righted. And that's where she is. So I think Shanley's writing in that sense is really, really great.
It is. It's a great show. So, yeah, we've covered quite a lot here.
Yeah.
And the show that we're doing is kind of for just to showcase artists in Fargo and just talk to them and be like, hey, you've got something to offer. And I mean, it's amazing that Fargo has a person like you and a place like Theater B.
Thanks.
You know, with its mission and everything. Is there any other thoughts you want to part on? Or
I'm sure that I'll want to talk some more about some things. We have, I guess one thing I would want to plug, and it depends on when this airs, I suppose, but one of the cool things that we're attempting this year is to do unified auditions.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so you've probably been through this. You know what it's like when you audition for schools, for example. You go and you audition and there's a whole bunch of schools looking at you, so you don't have to do 80 different auditions. So we're trying to apply that same kind of methodology here in town, because we realize that actors really struggle sometimes even deciding which audition do I go to.
Yeah.
These two things are going to conflict, or I can't get a hold of that script, but if I knew about it, I might want to do that one. They just can't manage all of that.
Yeah.
And so we figured, well, once again, sort of thinking from the outside in, how do we make it easier on the actors, which eventually might actually make it easier on us as directors and producers.
If we're all,
if we're all sitting in the room together, I might see actors I've never seen because they've not come through this door.
Yeah.
Or maybe I've seen them on the stage elsewhere, but I don't know where they're from, or you know, how do I encourage them to come audition? And certainly as an actor, I get to go and audition for 3-4 different directors at once. How much easier is that?
Yeah.
And then go to the callbacks that they decide I'm going to go to.
Yeah.
And then we start to figure out what the schedule looks like. So we're hoping that that's going to make things a lot easier on actors and easier on directors, because they can sit there kind of right after the auditions and immediately look at someone's schedule, someone's appropriateness for a role, maybe even talk with each other a little bit about referrals, like, I've never worked with this person, you know, what are they like, how are they doing, and give each other feedback about the performers that are out there, and say, oh yeah, I think that might be a really good choice for you, or this is a person who could really use that challenge, or I don't know if she's up to it, you know, I mean, just, so really good for actors, and I think in a lot of ways helping to deepen the relationships between the theater companies and among the theater companies, rather than always having a sense of competing, because we don't necessarily want to be competing. I think part of it is we all make each other better when we do our best work, you know, and so if doing our best work means we've got to be in the room together more often and talk about what that is and how we get there, I think that's great. So I'm excited for that.
I think that's another example of how, you know, Theater B is part of pushing things, trying new things in the area, and how exciting Fargo Theater is getting. So
yeah, it is.
Thank you so much for being on the show and being open and discussing, but also for allowing us to use the space and encouraging me to think about what I want to do with the show.
Yeah.
You've helped out a lot, so thank you.
Well, and I included my very best table here.
Absolutely. I've got to use it.
You're set. No, I hope you'll invite me back again.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Scott.
And that was my interview with Carrie Winterstein. Carrie is currently in production for the show Wit at Theater B, which will be performing this fall. To find out more about Wit and other great Theater B productions, make sure to like Theater B on Facebook, visit theaterb.org, or just stop in at Theater B on Main Avenue here. They've got a really friendly staff. Carrie is one of them. Thank you for watching. And I hope you learned something, but if you didn't, I hope you had fun. Thanks.